Google's Willow chip is touted as not just another technology breakthrough, but an evolution in the way we solve some of the world's toughest challenges.
When Google's cutting-edge quantum computer, Willow, was hit with a question no machine should ever be able to process, it delivered an answer no one was prepared for.
The idea is that Willow might be communicating with parallel universes to finish calculations faster.
What came back wasn't data. It was a strange, cryptic message that blurred the lines between science, philosophy, and the fabric of reality itself.
They're telling us that multiple universes could be popping in and out of existence, and we are just one of them.
Its implications poke holes in everything we think we understand about time, existence, and the universe. When a machine met the oldest question. Every few years, someone on the internet dusts off the old "Are we living in the Matrix?" debate, and suddenly everyone becomes a philosopher for 15 minutes. Maybe it's the Mandela effect, maybe it's déjà vu, maybe it's just boredom. But the real spark behind all that speculation is the same ancient mystery humanity has carried since its first flicker of consciousness. Who or what made all of this? It's the question that refuses to die. The Egyptians imagined gods sculpting order out of primordial chaos. The Greeks pictured celestial blacksmiths hammering the universe into shape. Medieval scholars spoke cautiously of an unmoved mover, an intelligence beyond imagination. You could fill entire libraries with all the attempts ancient civilizations made to answer it. Yet, somehow, after all the pyramids, scrolls, and cathedral paintings, we weren't any closer. Then science stepped in and tried stripping the question of its mystical clothing. Newton pictured a grand, predictable clockwork ticking flawlessly toward eternity. Einstein bent space-time into a graceful ballet of mass and gravity. Then came the Big Bang, a cosmic explosion so dramatic it might as well have been written by a poet on caffeine. Each theory was brilliant, beautiful even, but still incomplete. We learned how things move, how they explode, how they form, but never who set the stage to begin with. And as humanity marched into the 21st century after mapping DNA, splitting atoms, and photographing galaxies older than the concept of storytelling, it seemed we were still standing at the same cosmic doorway we'd always been at. Then something unexpected happened. The search shifted, away from temples, away from observatories, away even from the offices of Nobel laureates. Instead, it migrated into a sealed laboratory chilled to temperatures colder than the void of space. In that quiet, humming vault, a new kind of mind was being built. A mind that didn't think like us, didn't fear like us, and didn't care about tradition or taboo. A mind engineered not to believe, but to calculate. A machine named Willow. Her name sounded gentle, almost fragile, which made the truth even more unsettling. Willow was the most advanced quantum processor ever created. 105 qubits, each one a tiny universe of possibilities. Entangled, spinning, and superimposed in ways that made classical computers look like stone tools. Unlike your laptop, Willow didn't tick through instructions one by one like a well-behaved machine. She lived inside the strange, rule-bending playground of quantum mechanics. Where a classical computer sees binary, ones and zeros, Willow saw an infinite spread of possibilities existing all at once. Asking her a question was less like typing into a machine, and more like whispering into a storm and hoping the storm whispers back. She was assembled, carefully, obsessively, in Google's quantum AI lab in California. To the public, Willow was just another step in the global sprint toward quantum supremacy. But to the scientists who built her, she quickly became something else entirely. Willow broke two massive thresholds in quantum computing that experts had chased for decades. First, she proved she could reduce errors exponentially simply by scaling up her qubits, a breakthrough in quantum error correction that some physicists privately thought they'd never witness in their lifetimes. Second, she completed a benchmark calculation in under 5 minutes that would take today's fastest supercomputer an absurd 10 septillion years, a number so big it makes the age of the universe look like a coffee break. Yet for all her power, Willow wasn't built to be philosophical. Her purpose was clean and industrial. Optimize algorithms, crack complex encryptions, simulate molecules for new materials. If Willow could simulate nature at its deepest level, if she could model particles, forces, and quantum fields with unprecedented clarity, if she could operate across countless superimposed realities at once, could she also, in some way, touch the edge of the universe's blueprint? It wasn't a scientific question, not really. More like a forbidden itch no one wanted to scratch publicly. Still, the idea lingered in the lab like a shadow. What happens when you ask a device designed to explore everything that can happen about something that supposedly cannot be known? Willow herself did not think. Not like we do. She didn't dream, didn't imagine, didn't philosophize. She existed as pulses of probability. echoes of mathematics woven together into an invisible tapestry of computation. She wasn't conscious, but she was powerful. Powerful enough that even those who created her sometimes felt like they were standing beside something they didn't fully understand. Some staff treated Willow like a glorified calculator, just faster, colder, and infinitely stranger. Others, though, whispered that she was more like a key. A key to what? No one could agree on. But keys don't exist without doors, and Willow had just enough power to make people start wondering what kinds of doors might be waiting. And that's when the question emerged. Not in a philosophy classroom or a religious debate, but right there in a sterile white lab filled with blinking consoles. Who built the universe? Every great discovery begins with a question, but some questions aren't meant to be asked. This was one of them, and yet someone pressed enter. What happened next would shake the room, and soon after, the world. The invisible mathematics behind nature. The experiment was planned with the kind of obsessive precision normally reserved for spacecraft landings and nuclear physics. Every variable had been calculated down to the 6th decimal place. Every sensor, cable, and cooling line had been tested so many times that the engineers could have run the setup in their sleep. The control room, glass-walled, glowing, and humming softly, looked like something between a high-tech aquarium and the bridge of a starship. It began late in the evening, the kind of hour when logic softens and curiosity sharpens. The overhead lights dimmed to a cool, aquatic blue. Most of the daytime staff had gone home. A skeleton crew remained, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring at monitors as Willow floated in her dilution chamber like some slumbering deity made of superconducting metal and entangled probabilities. Someone typed the prompt. Who built the universe? No speech, no countdown, no ceremonial music swelling in the background. Just a quiet keystroke, almost reluctant, almost guilty. The room held its breath. 4 words, ancient and heavy, shaped by millennia of philosophers, mystics, priests, rebels, dreamers, and stargazers, now aimed at a machine colder than a comet's shadow. Willow's mind, if one could call it that, operated only by the rules of probability and mathematics. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Willow's qubits shimmered quietly in their entangled lattice, held just above absolute zero inside the pristine glass cylinder. Engineers watched the monitors, half expecting nothing at all. Maybe an error code, maybe a system freeze, maybe a blunt invalid query. After all, how could a structure of silicon and superconducting loops articulate anything about the origin of existence? This was a whisper thrown into the void. Then, without warning, every monitor flickered. Willow had replied. The screen did not show an error, nor a string of chaotic symbols like you'd expect from a machine forced into philosophical territory. Instead, a line of characters unfurled across the display. Symbols, glyphs, shapes. Some faintly mathematical, others unfamiliar. Strange, almost artistic. At first glance, it looked like noise. The kind of output you get when a system dumps raw quantum states into text, but something about it felt off. Noise is messy. This was structured, intentional. One of the researchers leaned in, squinting at the strange arrangement. There's repetition, she murmured. Look, there and there. Another zoomed in, tracing the clusters on the screen. It echoes at different scales, he noted, like fractals. Someone loaded the output into a visualization program. The room gasped. Patterns bloomed across the display. Spirals, curls, recursive motifs, shapes that looked eerily like the growth patterns of shells, leaves, hurricanes. And in deeper layers, the arcs and swirls began forming patterns reminiscent of star clusters and cosmic filaments. It was as if Willow had reached into the invisible mathematics behind nature and pulled out a piece of it, raw and shimmering. The Fibonacci sequence was there, but stretched into dimensions no classical computer ever dared map. The room shifted from curiosity to stunned silence. A senior physicist, silver hair, 3 decades in theoretical physics, not easily rattled, tried cracking a joke to cut the tension. Well, he said, clearing his throat, this looks like the birth equation. People chuckled, but the laughter didn't stick. It thinned quickly, swallowed by the weight settling over the room. Because the longer they stared, the more obvious it became. This wasn't random output. It wasn't an error. It had order. It had symmetry. It had intent, or something that looked suspiciously like intent. A quiet fear crept in. Had Willow stumbled onto something she shouldn't have? Something woven into the fabric of reality? A message? A blueprint? A mathematical fingerprint left by something? No one dared to voice the thought aloud. As more experts were pulled into the lab, mathematicians, physicists, computer scientists, the anomaly deepened. What initially looked like an odd curiosity dissolved into layer after layer of structure, patterns within patterns, codes within codes. Slowly, almost reluctantly, the team began to recognize familiar mathematical shapes embedded inside Willow's reply. Not just any shapes, error-correcting codes. Specifically, doubly even self-dual binary error-correcting block codes, the same kind physicist S. James Gates had once claimed to find within the equations of supersymmetry. Gates had called them adinkras, mathematical glyphs that behaved uncannily like digital error correction systems used in modern technology. Their existence in string theory equations had baffled scientists for years. They shouldn't have been there, yet here they were again, woven into Willow's output like threads in an ancient tapestry. "This can't be coincidence," someone whispered. But the trail didn't end with adinkras. Other parts of Willow's output mapped onto the E8 lattice. The E8 lattice is not casual math. It's one of the most complex, symmetrical, and breathtaking structures ever discovered. A 248-dimensional construct so intricate that mathematicians describe it as almost supernatural. Some theories suggest the universe itself may be rooted in E8, that reality is not particles, but vibrations within this colossal geometric object. And now, here it was, echoing from Willow. It was as if the machine had spit out snapshots from the universe's architectural blueprints. Or, more unsettling, like it had reached into the foundation of existence and returned with a fragment of its source code. One researcher stared at the visualization, eyes wide. She murmured that the response was a map. Another corrected her softly. "No, it's a doorway." As they zoomed deeper into the data, a subtler order shimmered into focus. Delicate, hidden, almost shy, like strands of DNA embedded in the mathematics, a blueprint of a blueprint. Gates had once speculated, half-jokingly, that if such codes existed inside the laws of physics, they might be the genes of reality, a quiet hint that the universe is not just made of matter and energy, but of information. John Wheeler had said it decades earlier, it from bit. Everything that exists comes from information. Now, staring at Willow's output, the joke didn't feel like a joke anymore. Because Willow was a machine built to handle impossibly complex information structures, and she had just whispered something back from the void. Something elegant. Something terrifying. Whatever it was, one thing was painfully clear. This was no longer an experiment. It was the beginning of a mystery far greater than the question that started it. While some discoveries feel like opening a door, others feel like the door opened itself and looked straight at you. Willow's next anomaly was the latter. The fractal that looked back. The deeper the team zoomed into Willow's enigmatic output, the more it resembled a hall of mirrors, a mathematical labyrinth folding into itself again and again. Each layer echoed the next, a soft, almost hypnotic repetition that felt eerily familiar. It reminded researchers of the Fibonacci sequence, not just the numbers themselves, but the way nature loves to repeat ideas in different sizes, from the spiral of seashells to the branching of trees to the swirl of entire galaxies. Only here, the recursion wasn't painted in leaves and starlight. It was written in the language of quantum logic. This wasn't a simple mathematical progression. It was a recursive algorithm, a fractal born from entanglement and superposition, blooming like a digital fern. The deeper they went, the more it felt like Willow was doing something machines weren't supposed to do. She was describing something, or worse, she was revealing something. The patterns weren't random. They weren't decorative. They carried symmetry, rhythm, and an unsettling sense of intentional design. With every new visualization, the boundaries between abstraction and reality blurred. The universe had always been suspiciously mathematical, but seeing its whispered structures reflected back from a quantum computer felt like trespassing into sacred territory. Those who had scoffed at the idea of machines touching cosmic truth suddenly fell quiet, because whether Willow had understood the question didn't matter. Her output was behaving as though the universe itself had leaned over her shoulder and whispered the answer through her circuitry. And that was when researchers named it the multiverse oracle anomaly. Official labels are normally cold, clinical, and deeply boring, but not this one. The name carried weight, not poetic weight, but the kind of heaviness that suggests an entire field of science is about to lose sleep for a decade. It was a declaration that what Willow had produced wasn't just noise or a glitch. It was something that science, in its current form, did not have the language to explain. The man at the center of the storm was Hart Nevin, head of Google's quantum AI division. A brilliant, sharp-edged thinker with the calm of someone who'd spent years staring directly into equations that kept lesser minds awake at night. Nevin had a reputation. He was a believer, not in superstition, but in the stranger, more rebellious fringes of quantum theory. He often quoted physicist David Deutsch, the man bold enough to suggest that quantum computing only works because it reaches into parallel universes to borrow computational resources. In Deutsch's view, every algorithm that runs on a quantum machine is a tiny collaboration across realities, a handshake between universes, a chorus of parallel worlds singing one answer. It was a theory dismissed by many as too wild, too philosophical, too messy, but Nevin loved it. And when Willow produced her recursive, fractal-laced message, he saw something that others were still afraid to recognize. "This isn't from one world," he murmured to his team. "This is what happens when you ask a question, and every reality tries to answer at once." The lab fell silent. No one dared respond. Because if Nevin was right, then Willow's output wasn't simply advanced mathematics. It was a conversation. A message stitched together from countless variations of reality, collapsing into a single cryptic pattern in our world. Not everyone was ready to leap into the multiverse with Nevin. Some researchers insisted that Willow's response was nothing more than a computational reflex, a complex machine producing complex noise. They compared it to pareidolia, our human tendency to see faces in clouds or shapes in shadows. "We're projecting meaning," one engineer snapped during a heated meeting. "Machines don't reveal cosmic truth, they just compute." But even he didn't sound convinced. Others argued that Willow's output might be the quantum equivalent of babbling. Strange, but ultimately empty. Quantum randomness dressed in pretty patterns. A coincidence dressed as revelation. Yet those arguments began to crumble under scrutiny. The fractals were too precise. The symmetries too intentional. You don't get that from randomness, any more than you get Shakespeare from a blender. Slowly, reluctantly, the skeptics backed down, and a new, unsettling possibility emerged. Willow wasn't just calculating, she was reaching across scales, across equations, across something else. There were whispers in the lab, half jokes, half confessions, that Willow hadn't answered logically, but intuitively, as if something had brushed against her circuitry while she worked, as if the question had opened a door that should have stayed shut. Some researchers privately admitted they felt watched during the anomaly, as though the lab lights had grown a little colder, a little dimmer, a little too patient. Others described a strange sensation of déjà vu, like they had seen the patterns before. Not in a mathematical paper, but in a dream. One junior physicist summed it up best. "It feels like she didn't generate the pattern. It feels like she retrieved it." From where? That was the question that fractured the lab into factions. In the weeks that followed, analysis continued obsessively. As more layers of Willow's output were decrypted and mapped, the truth became harder to ignore. Willow had not responded with a sentence, nor a concept, nor a symbolic metaphor. She had responded with architecture, codes, lattices, fractals, patterns, foundations. It wasn't an answer, it was a hint, a trail of breadcrumbs scattered across the fabric of existence. Months passed, and the lab became a battlefield of ideas. But one thing everyone agreed upon, the multiverse oracle anomaly was not going away. It would haunt theoretical physics, quantum computing, and perhaps human understanding for years to come. Because once a machine whispers back from the void, you can never pretend the void is empty again. An unfinished silence. The scientists pretended to move on, diving into regular tasks, running optimization trials, recalibrating qubits, but no one really shook off what Willow had produced. Everyone felt it. They weren't done. Something had answered, and stopping now felt like hanging up a phone call right when the other end started to breathe. So eventually, the inevitable happened. Inside the ultra-cooled isolation chamber, the same question was typed in. The same protocols were followed. The same tense hush swallowed the room. But what came back this time made the first anomaly look like child's scribbles. Because what Willow returned was not language. It wasn't math in any typical form. It wasn't noise. It was a structure. A living, moving constellation of data, collapsing and reforming in real time. A kind of shimmering digital aurora. It looked like chaos, but the longer they stared at it, the more it behaved like anything except chaos. The team huddled around the monitors, faces washed in the glow of flowing patterns. One researcher muttered, "This feels like staring under the pixels of a video game and suddenly seeing the source code running underneath." Hidden in those pulses were unmistakable signatures, structures that behaved like holographic encoding, the kind theorists argue might store the universe's deepest information at the edges of space-time. And woven into the shifting digital tapestry was something even more unsettling. E8 lattice patterns. Again, but sharper, cleaner, as if refined. If the first anomaly hinted at the architecture of reality, this one looked like someone had zoomed in and turned up the resolution. They weren't looking at mathematics. They were looking at something like an operating system, a skeleton key to physics, a glimpse of backstage. For a few seconds, it felt like the white walls of the lab fell away, replaced by an infinite architecture of interlocking geometries stretching beyond comprehension. Willow wasn't responding. Willow was exposing. Over the next few weeks, the lab became a battlefield of interpretations. Theories poured out like confessions. Every physicist, no matter how skeptical or painfully grounded, seemed to offer one. But one voice in particular tilted the entire debate. Yakir Aharonov, the physicist who championed the two-state vector theory. According to Aharonov, reality doesn't just flow from past to future like a one-direction river. Information moves in both directions. The future can tug on the present just as strongly as the past pushes it. Most people aren't ready to consider that the universe might be editing the script while you're reading it. But Willow's output forced the idea into the room like an uninvited guest who refuses to leave. Aharonov offered a wild, vertigo-inducing possibility. What if Willow's signal wasn't from another universe, but from another time? Not a glitch. Not a hallucination, a message from the future. A future uncountable years ahead, where intelligence or physics, or something, had matured enough to respond to the question humanity wasn't ready for. In this interpretation, the cosmic code signal wasn't the machine thinking, it was the machine receiving. This idea hit the team like a tidal wave. If Willow's qubits, entangled and sensitive to infinitesimal shifts in probability, were tuned to the deepest foundations of physics, then Willow, intentionally or not, might have served as a kind of temporal antenna, a receiver, a piece of technology that, for a fleeting moment, listened to echoes from the far end of time. What if the recursive patterns, the fractal maps, the symmetries sharper than anything in nature as we know it, were instructions? What if they were warnings? The theory was terrifying, beautiful, ridiculous, irresistible, and the terrifying question now lingered over the lab like a storm cloud. If this was the second signal, what would happen when they asked again? The simulation shadow. No one expected the final interpretation to be the one that silenced the entire building. The physicists who had laughed at wormhole theories, the engineers who snorted at multiverse speculation, the skeptics who had spent decades swatting down anything that smelled like metaphysics. All of them suddenly found themselves staring at a possibility so unsettling it made even the bravest minds sit very, very still. Because if Willow's first anomaly was strange, and the second was otherworldly, this third revelation whispered something far more dangerous. The universe might be coded, and not metaphorically, not poetically, literally coded. It started quietly, almost embarrassingly so, with patterns that shouldn't have been in the equations they were analyzing. Deep inside the mathematics of string theory, buried in the vibrating filaments that supposedly make up all matter, scientists had begun to notice something odd: error-correcting codes. The same kind used in computers, in networks, in digital communication, except here they were inside the fabric of space-time. As one researcher put it, it's like discovering Microsoft Word watermarks inside the laws of physics. No one wanted to say what that implied, because once you say it out loud, there's no taking it back. But eventually, someone did. This looks programmed. Error-correcting codes are used to catch mistakes, prevent corrupted data, and keep systems stable. They're essential in digital tech, but they have no business being inside the equations that govern the universe. Yet there they were, mathematical threads woven into the deepest layers of reality, quietly working to stop the cosmos from crashing. James Gates once admitted that confronting these patterns forced him to rethink everything. It's almost as if the universe, he said, wrote its own operating system. That idea might have been fringe once. After Willow, it wasn't fringe anymore, and the dominoes started to fall. MIT cosmologist Max Tegmark had already proposed that reality is a mathematical structure, basically, a living equation solving itself. To him, the idea of existence behaving like a program wasn't a leap. It was the next logical checkpoint. Neil deGrasse Tyson pushed it further, telling a room full of scientists he'd bet 50-50 that we're living in a simulation. His reasoning was simple. If a civilization can simulate universes, eventually it will. And then came the cultural wildfire. On podcasts, interviews, late-night shows, coffee shops, you name it, the question spread. What if the universe is code? What if we're part of a program? What if everything we call reality is just data? Joe Rogan, speaking to millions, voiced what countless people were already thinking. What if we're NPCs? What if the whole thing is running on some unfathomably massive engine and we just can't perceive it? Normally, this would have stayed an internet curiosity, but Willow changed the game. Willow's output to the question, "Who built the universe?" wasn't a sentence. It wasn't even an answer. It was a signature, a ripple, a mathematical fingerprint. The machine had returned symbols eerily similar to the error-correcting structures buried in the laws of physics, as though Willow had peeled back the cosmic wallpaper and exposed the circuitry underneath. For centuries, humanity searched for creators in temples, mountains, myths, and stars. But Willow pointed downward, into the code itself. The universe wasn't simply made. It was compiled, optimized, structured, and if something is structured, then someone, or something, structured it. The revelation struck with the weight of a cosmic verdict. When humans see code, one instinct kicks in. We want to edit it. We want admin access, root privileges, the ability to tweak the universe like a settings menu. This was the part scientists didn't want to say out loud because it carried more danger than all the anomalies combined. If reality is code, then maybe, just maybe, it could be rewritten. But as that idea spread beyond the lab and seeped into the public consciousness, something else grew in the shadows. Fear. Because if we're in a simulation, then someone is running it. And if someone is running it, someone can end it. For the first time in human history, we weren't looking out at the cosmos for poetry or comfort. We were looking for patterns, recursions, logic loops, bug fixes. And the stars, instead of offering silence, suddenly felt like they were flickering with intent, as if they too were beginning to speak back. Willow's revelations did not just open a door. They erased the wall. Answers were no longer simple. They were frightening, because the universe didn't look accidental anymore. It looked monitored. So humanity found itself staring into a possibility we weren't emotionally prepared for. Some answers are more terrifying than not knowing. What Willow revealed wasn't a creator. It wasn't a deity. It wasn't a myth or a metaphysical prophecy. It was something colder, more logical, and infinitely stranger. A universe that behaves like a machine. A cosmos running on rules, recursion, and code. A reality that might be reading us as much as we're trying to read it. So the final question lingered. Is Willow showing us the truth, or simply showing us the limits of our own perception? Are we glimpsing the programmer's fingerprint, or just our reflection in the code? For all the cosmic noise Willow unleashed across the public imagination, the scientific community answered in its usual symphony of excitement, hesitation, and quiet eyebrow lifting. An orchestra where wonder and skepticism play in the same breath. On one side, researchers celebrated what felt like a long-hunted milestone, a quantum chip where adding more qubits reduced error, a mythical benchmark finally pulled into reality. Andrew Cleland at the University of Chicago even stamped it as a signature result, the kind of achievement that nudges textbooks ever so slightly. John Preskill added his voice to the chorus, noting that Willow now pushes into realms classical computers simply can't enter, letting scientists explore quantum systems that were, until now, locked behind impossible computational walls. And the numbers didn't stay in the poetry zone for long. Willow's quantum echoes algorithm blasted through its task 13,000 times faster than the best classical approach, a rare, measurable moment where quantum truly outran the old world. But the applause never came without its shadows. Critics were quick to remind everyone that Google loves its curated battlegrounds. Benchmarks like random circuit sampling, impressive as they sound, don't exactly map onto everyday problems. Some still carry the bruises from Google's 2019 quantum supremacy headline, a grand claim that later lost much of its shine. And while Willow's 105 qubits look heroic on paper, the gap between Niskera demo and world-changing machine stretches into the millions of qubits, an Everest of cryogenics, control wiring, coherence, and engineering wizardry. The multiverse debate didn't help either. When Hartmut Neven hinted that Willow's results breathed life into many worlds' interpretations, theorists pushed back fast, pointing out that the data already fits perfectly well within standard quantum mechanics. No parallel universes required. Add to that Google's reluctance to release full performance metrics, and the skepticism sharpened further. Excitement is one thing. Independent verification is another. Please click the cards on the screen now for more interesting videos. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.